I am very excited for this episode because we have our very first returning guest,
Yes.
Oskhar Pineda.
Yes.
And well, the reason why we're back is because you have an amazing book coming up, Think Outside the Boss.
I think trust is time insensitive. My book has the 4 principles that I developed over more than 35 years of leadership.
You're asking for simple, human-centered principles that could be implemented today in organizations. But to start that, you need us to have a conversation about what that means for us.
Basically, it's reframing, restructuring our organizations to the very fundamentals of what we are supposed to be practicing anyway. Organizations that are very good to their employees are very profitable. Not only that, they're sustainable and people are happy.
Welcome back to the Future Human Experience. I'm your host, Eric Rodriguez. I am very excited for this episode because we have our very first returning guest,
Yes.
Oskhar Pineda.
Yes.
Oskhar, bienvenido. Welcome back to the Future Human Experience, my friend.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be back.
And well, the reason why we're back is because you have an amazing book coming up at the first week of June, which we'll link up on our show notes.
June 3rd.
June 3rd. Think Outside the Boss. Congratulations, first off, Oskhar, for this. We know this is a Herculean effort to write a book, but thank you for sharing this with all of us and the important message that you have in this book coming up.
Thank you.
With that said, Oskhar, let's dive straight into this,
Okay.
right? And again, I'll link back to our first conversation where we got to know you a little bit more, got to know your journey a little bit more. Let's dive into more about like the leadership principles and the work that you're doing here with this book. I'll go straight to the point. What do you think is the leadership trend that you see today, the trendy conversation you've heard about leadership that's probably not being of service to employees or organizations in today's day and age?
Whew, that's a loaded question.
To start,
but let's
go.
Let's dissect it. You know what it is? It's also a pet peeve of mine because I believe that people talk about it a lot and it's not achievable. Only because people like metrics and people like numbers. There is this love affair that we have with life-work balance. Balance doesn't exist. Period. And I think it's important to get that idea out of our heads. And I think it misleads a lot of people. A lot of mistakes are made. It causes friction at work. It causes friction at home. So I don't like that trend because I think what we can attain, I think what we can achieve is harmony. You will never have equal amounts of this or equal amounts of that, especially when it comes to work and life. Yeah. So I don't think that trend is something that I embrace very much.
Yeah, and I think that also changes in time, right? I remember, you've had an opportunity to, yourself and your wife have met my wife, and y'all been an extension of our family over the last few months. And you've seen how our lives have changed too, right? I mean, we were telling you stories about how our career started and how we navigated what we called work-life balance at that time, or even what we called a harmonious experience at that time. We're very satisfied and content and thriving, but that changes, right? As either relationships change, locations might change, the jobs themselves might change.
Kids grow up,
exactly right.
Soccer games
on the weekends, dance recitals, etc. And that changes, and I appreciate that. However, with that said though, Oskhar, we can't achieve those things if we don't have certain aspects in our culture and our communities and how we're building organizations. One of the things you recommend in your book is how, and you shared this beautifully in our first conversation, which again, folks can dive into the reason why you care about this. But one of the things you encourage us to do is to navigate a culture of trust, right? And if we are even vulnerable enough to engage in these conversations with our employees, we're able to understand them, understand where our organization wants to go, where employees want to go, and we're able to create that authentic experience for our employees. Share with us a little bit more about those 4 principles that you're encouraging us to do, but also when it comes to trust and vulnerability, why is that important today in this day and age?
I think trust is time insensitive, is not something that is trendy or comes in fashion and out of fashion. I think is the very glue of our existence. So my book has the 4 principles that I developed over more than 35 years of leadership. And the principles are vulnerability. And vulnerability is first because I realized early in my career that I didn't know everything, and I can't do everything. I cannot put the world on my shoulder like Atlas and carry the world on my back. So I understood that in order for me to learn, I needed to understand that I was at a deficit in knowledge, and that in order for me to be strong, I needed other people to support me. And if I wanted to grow, I had to give something up. And that something up was a little bit of pride, or in some cases is a little bit of fear of being ridiculed because you don't know, or being chastised because you're asking a question. So anyway, so vulnerability for me is number one. Yeah. It's the gateway that opens the door to everything else. The second is communication, because I believe that when people work from a position of knowledge, everything is good. When we can all be on the same page, everything is good. The football players, soccer players, they know the play. They know who they're playing. They know what the matchups are. They know exactly what they need to do, but they huddle before the game. They get together in the locker room before the game to go over the plays. And I think communication is important. Communication actually gives you the unity. You cannot play in the symphony orchestra and have different instruments and different music and make this beautiful sound together unless you are on the same page. And and the third, to me, is trust. And it's self-explanatory. Without trust, marriages don't work. And in my book, I talk about trust as something that when you do it over and over again, because it's not a once and done type of thing, you do it over and over again. Why? Because trust must be expressed in a very explicit way to become implicit. Frankie just left. He's going to board a plane soon. He boards that plane. He trusts implicitly that he's going to get home safe. We don't know how long that pilot has been flying that plane. We don't know the mechanics. We don't know the condition of the plane, for that matter, or the weather conditions. But we implicitly trust. And in our organizations, that's what we need to do. Practice trust so much that eventually it's implicit.
So Oscar, I agree with you. I mean, as not only someone that's navigated the corporate world, your principles resonate with me because I've seen it in the good ways. I've seen it in the organizations that have not done that as well. But let's also be realistic, right? That at times organizations, they get inspired by this work and they're like, man, I really want to do this. And then we end up going back to this culture of fear and this culture of oh, this is how we did it before. And it's great that Oscar is bringing his great experience, but that doesn't resonate with my company, or that's a different industry and it's not going to resonate with this industry. What do you recommend to those organizations that sometimes we look at these principles and you're not calling for anything rocket science?
No.
Right?
No.
You're asking
These are the very basic of life, really.
Very basic human.
Basics of life.
Right. But still organizations yield into doing something a little bit more that's a little bit, not opposite of this, but probably going into more of a sense of fear or following different or hierarchical type of behaviors, right? That we go into the sense of, I can't trust you because either the previous organization was the one that treated me this way, or my previous employer treated me this way. So I come in with sometimes even those traumas into some of these experiences. What would be your recommendation, Oscar, either to one, why do we do that today, that these principles are out there and you're encouraging all of us to navigate it, but two, how can we take your book and practically start implementing it? Like, what would be one of those 1 or 2 first steps that you think that folks could start doing today in their work, even though maybe the organization is not built around trust and vulnerability, but I'm a mid-level manager and I believe in what your book's telling me about, and I just want to just be a better manager tomorrow. I'm not going to change my entire company, but there's something I could do tomorrow for my little organization I'm trying to build.
My ideas are bouncing off the walls of my head, man. You got me thinking so much. But let me just share this with you. I think that there's comfort in going back to the old ways for some people, because that's the way they knew it, and they want that structure. A lot of times they want the boundaries so well defined that they are only responsible for a limited amount of things. And once you kind of get to that boundary and overlap, accountability is then deferred to somebody else. So it's easy to fall back into the old ways. The other thing is fear. You know, a lot of people go back because of fear, because the machine is structured in such a way that this and this and this and this must happen. Now, if you follow the path and everything works, at best you get silence, but no problems. But if you don't follow the path and something goes wrong, then you didn't follow protocol. You didn't follow directions. The processes were not followed. And a lot of people are afraid of that because we have created an environment that we do not allow room for people to actually fail. And Frankie was talking about failure. It's a beautiful thing, because in my business, I saw failure as a trip to the lab to figure out where we had the issue and then solve it and then share that information with everybody else. So I think the first thing that we need to do is take the fear out of people that's executing with creativity and with freedom. The other thing is get out of the comfort zone. I mean, and these are not things that just work for little companies, for three people, for the guy at the 7-Eleven or the guy at the Sheets or at the gas station. I mean, listen, these principles were applied by Herb Kelleher from Southwest. And it works. It works. It works for Sam Theanovagan on Parts Life in Philadelphia. It works for the Menlo Corporation. It worked for Satya Nadella from Microsoft. He picked up the organization in shambles and boom, skyrocketed. Why? Because they got out of their own way. I think people get way too comfortable. And the other thing is that we have this tendency to fix problems with what I call, you heard it here first, guys, corporate duct tape. Quick fixes over and over and over again, over and over and over again, over and over and over again. And leadership does it, and people under the leadership do it because it's good enough to get me through, and we'll deal with the rest tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think what you're recommending, even for the sense of vulnerability and trust, and even with communication, I think sometimes when we dive into the corporate, what was it called again? The corporate duct tape?
Duct tape mentality,
right? The duct tape mentality. If we don't have those principles around us, we're going to struggle, right? Or we're going to dive into that's how we did it before, and we haven't created an environment good enough to question that. Right. And I think, at least in my personal experiences, when I either was leading an organization or being part of an organization that was innovating, they had that culture of like, let's just go and explore. Let's go and explore, why do we have that tape today, right? Because it probably doesn't feel like duct tape today. It might feel like a rule, right? Or a particular process that was put in place. But at the end of the day, when you go and you uncover it, it's like, oh, darn, that was just duct tape, exactly what you said. But because we had a culture good enough for us to have those open communications and have the vulnerability, you had built this trust in these organizations, we could do that. And I think as the world is moving at this accelerated pace today, if we don't have those open communications, if we are not building trust organizations that are built around trust, like Satya Nadella, I think that's a perfect example of Microsoft. That's a great example from a top-down approach. But I could bet you right now that Microsoft had a lot of smaller little teams that were just trying to nudge it, right? They were trying to push it into this culture that Satya tapped into, but they just weren't either empowered to do that, or they were just doing it on their own. And I think what your book does in a beautiful way is that it becomes this call of action for all of us, regardless of where we are in the organization, regardless of where we're in the hierarchy,
size of organization.
or the size of organization. Say, hey, you have an opportunity to do these 4 things today, or tomorrow when you walk in, or on Monday when you come back to work. And that's why your book resonated with me, because it spoke to me. I've never been a CEO of a major corporation, but I've been a manager. I've been a chief of staff. I've been a go-to-market leader. I've been a project manager. And reflecting on those 4 principles, I was like, oh my God, like Oscar's speaking to me, because either I did great things in those roles or I fumbled in those roles because I wasn't going back to what your call to action is for all of us. So Oscar, of course, your book is titled Thinking Outside the Boss. You've been the boss. When have there been cases that you've actually gotten something completely wrong and you had to think differently and think outside the boss?
That's a funny question to me, because I never have.
Okay.
I never have. And let me qualify that I'm not that special, and I don't want to tell anybody that I came down from the heavens with a host of angels or anything like that. But I never have, because I actually was as happy as I could be on a sales job. I was a sales guy. I had a good job, no problem. Somebody needed help. I mean, it's a lot of detail. I think I've told you the story before. Bottom line, I ended up going to help this guy who had a construction company. And what I found the first week on the job was every possible principle. By the way, I have Eric's notes here, so I'm cheating, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
It's for a good cause. So every possible principle is violated. And I realized real quick, I'm 27, 28 years old. I'm going to close it. I'm done cheating.
No, you're good.
So every possible principle was violated. So I realized that the boss knew everything. He ruled with an iron fist. He actually was he was dispensing information even though he didn't know what he was doing. He also did not allow for a lot of input. The guys spoke a different language. Fortunately, I spoke that language. But the problem was not the difference in language. The problem was they were not communicating. He wasn't communicating with them. There was no trust. They were always suspicious of him. And they didn't know what they were doing or why they were doing what they were doing. So I get smacked in the face with this my first day on the job. So I immediately realized these guys need help. I've been in sales. I know about people. So I understand what's going on, not in tremendous depth. But I saw the need. And I never, ever, ever, not 1 minute of my career, I felt that I was there to command, to tell them what to do, and not allow any room. Number one, I couldn't afford to do that because I didn't know the job. They did. Yeah. So I had to make sure that I had this really, really cool interactive dynamic relationship with them. And I had to make sure that I was open. I had to make sure that I was vulnerable. I had to make sure that I communicated well. I had to make sure that they gave me all the information that I needed and that I gave them all the information that they needed. I had to make sure that when I said something and I told them, I got your back, that they would believe me. Yeah. And I backed it up with action. So I saw that from the very first week that I started the work. So the result of that is that over 35 years, I kept practicing it and practicing it and practicing it and getting better and better and better and better at it. I wish I could tell you that there were times that I felt that I was the boss. I only felt that I was the one when I had to take the hits because something didn't go right, which I had no problem doing.
But Oscar, it also reminds me of one of my very first learning experiences too, as a boss, I guess you could say, as a manager, is also us not feeling that way. For me, it was I was given a frontline manager role that I frankly did not want either. Right? Someone saw in me, they said, Eric,
I have a question.
They said, Eric, man, I think this will be a great role for you. And I'm like, no, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fall into my expertise. And because that individual saw that in me and said, no, there's other things you could bring to this work or to this role. I remember vividly, because I was a frontline manager for the day shift, I made the space to learn. I had to make the space there because I did not know the work. I did not know the night shift work. I did not know a lot of things. But what the manager saw in me was exactly actually what you were sharing in the book was I had a communication strategy, or I was very, very open with all the projects I was doing. I was always very vulnerable. I was always the first one to raise my hand. I don't know this, right? He saw that as an engineer looking at me, an engineer saying, hey, I'm still trying to learn this. For him, it was a strength, not a weakness. The sense of building trust. I had built trust within the organization or the new hires, the new engineers. And anyway, so he saw these things in me. And so now looking back at your book, I'm gonna share this with the audience as we get close to wrapping up. One of the things I did with books in the 20 years I was in corporate America was I would encourage either the employee resource groups or a certain team or leadership team to buy books and just dive into that book for 2 months or so. However long it takes us to dive into it, let's go and do this. This book is one of those books that should be on that radar now,
Thank
right?
you, Eric.
And if you are, again, a mid-level manager, employee resource group, a CEO of an organization, take your leadership team, buy a few books. It's a small investment, and have a conversation about it. You're not going to solve all the issues tomorrow, but if you're willing enough to dive into these concepts and say, reflect on these concepts and what does this mean for our organization today? It will ignite what could be possible tomorrow. I firmly believe that. I did that with several authors that most of y'all have seen today around this work. But trust me, that approach works. And I think, again, you're not asking for anything luxurious or rocket science with your book. You're asking for simple, human-centered principles that could be implemented today in organizations. But to start that, you need to have a conversation about what that means for us.
Let me just clarify. I mean, this is not kumbaya, feel good type of a book. I mean, nor is it stripping anybody off their position or authority. Basically, it's reframing, restructuring our organizations to the very fundamentals of what we are supposed to be practicing anyway.
Yes.
And the other beautiful thing is that as a leader, what's in it for you? Organizations that are very good to their employees are very profitable. There's plenty of research that shows that. Not only that, they're sustainable and people are happy. I wanted to ask you real quick, were you ever given any formal leadership training at Microsoft?
I was at Intel.
At Intel?
So yes, there is training. Don't get me wrong. There's training.
Leadership training.
There is leadership training.
Because let me just follow through with this, because here's what happens. I think in corporate America, we commit what I called the crime of creating corporate or leadership illiteracy. And what I mean by that is a lot of times somebody's promoted to a certain position because they're really good at what they do, and they're put in charge of that to supervise other people. But the whole thing is created by this expertise in technical.
Correct.
In the technical field.
Yep.
But they don't know anything about leadership.
That's correct.
So we have people who are already promoted at a deficit. Technology is moving so bloody fast, especially in tech. So you're trying to keep up. They promote you. Yeah. You don't know how to be a leader. So now you have to keep up with tech, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate problems with your teams. Bottom line is, the principles are the very basics of life. They apply to your marriage.
Yes.
To the PTA meetings.
Yes.
To the soccer team.
The youth soccer team
coach.
Yep.
They apply to Ted Lasso knows a thing or two.
Yes,
He's mentioned in my book. In any case, this is not rocket science, like you said. I hope that people see tremendous value in buying it, in studying it, in passing it along. I mean, the book is very easy to read. I share stories and all kinds of things in it. But anyway, and I'm really, really thankful for you having me.
Well, Oscar, it's been a pleasure to have you return to the Future of Experience. I'm excited for your book and for it to start changing not only our corporations, organizations, how we navigate this fast-changing world. It's with these human-centered principles that we could start navigating this. And I just thank you again for for trusting in me to have this conversation as your book launches, but more importantly, for the work that you continue to do in our organizations and our communities all around the world.
I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to call you a friend.
Hey everyone, this is Eric, the host of the Future Human Experience. The reason why this podcast was created was to be a platform for others to really bring these conversations to life. So if you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. It will really help our channel and expose these ideas for others. Thank you.